The battlefield was a graveyard of twisted metal and smoldering debris. Once-proud starships, now shredded into smoking fragments, lay scattered across the rocky terrain, their once gleaming hulls scarred with deep gouges and burn marks. The air reeked of ozone and charred fuel. Silence had settled, broken only by the occasional groan of dying machinery. The war between the Cathari Empire and the coalition of rebellious systems had ended, or perhaps merely paused. But the cost was evident in every shattered piece of equipment, every motionless body strewn across the valley floor. Commander Violia had been one of the galaxy's most feared warriors. Her name alone had sent fleets fleeing before her, and her strategic brilliance was unmatched. She had led her forces to countless victories, her reputation carved into the annals of history. But all that meant nothing now. Lying on the jagged rocks, her armor ripped open along the spine where a massive plasma strike had landed, she could not move from the waist down. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to push herself up, but only a sharp, searing pain shot through her torso, reminding her that she was powerless. She tried to make sense of what had happened. The battle had been fierce, chaotic, and unforgiving. Her elite squad had been overrun when the Coalition's secret weapon, a rapid-fire energy cannon, struck her mid-command. Her soldiers had retreated, abandoning her in the aftermath. In the Cathari Code, a warrior who could not fight was no longer worthy of life, and Violia understood the unspoken verdict. She was to be left behind. Yet she did not feel anger at their retreat. It was expected. Her culture had been built on strength and survival of the fittest. Weakness was a liability. Being abandoned was the natural order. She had anticipated it, and in some strange way had already accepted her fate. She stared up at the alien sky, swirling with violet and gold clouds that reflected the dying light of a distant sun. She wondered if anyone would remember her name after this war, or if it would vanish, like so many others who had fallen before her. Hours passed in agonizing silence. Violia's thoughts drifted in fragments. Her life flashed before her eyes, the early training under her mother, the endless drills, the first victory in command, the battles that had cemented her reputation. She had lived for the fight, and now the fight was gone. Her body betrayed her, and soon the cold would claim her too. It was then that she heard the faintest sound, footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, unlike the pounding march of soldiers or the clanging steps of automated drones that sometimes scavenged battlefields. Whoever approached moved with caution, careful not to step on the broken remnants scattered across the terrain. She tried to focus, squinting through the dust and smoke. A figure emerged, small, unarmored, and fragile in appearance compared to the towering Cathari. Human. She had seen them before during diplomatic missions, delicate-looking, unthreatening, and often dismissed as insignificant. Yet somehow, the human approaching her seemed different. There was a calm determination in their step, a measured care in the way they navigated the rubble. He stopped a few meters from her, crouching down to assess her condition. His environmental suit was patched in several places, evidence that he had traveled far through dangerous zones. A tool bag hung from his shoulder, not a weapon, which immediately piqued her suspicion. "Wow," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. "Still alive, huh?" Violia tried to respond, but only a strained, shallow sound emerged. Her throat, dry and cracked from the heat of the plasma strike, refused proper words. The human removed his helmet, revealing a face lined with fatigue but marked by clear, determined eyes. "Don't worry," he said softly. "I'm not here to finish you off." The translator in her armor sputtered weakly and then activated, rendering his words in her tongue. She studied him carefully, calculating her options. In the past, humans had been unpredictable, sometimes clever, sometimes reckless, and often motivated by strange moral codes she could not understand. Yet this one made no move to harm her. Instead, he knelt beside her and began examining her armor and body with meticulous care. A handheld device scanned the damaged sections of her suit. "That's bad," he murmured. "Spinal damage, neural disruption. Whoever hit you didn't want you getting back up." He adjusted a component near her collar, sending a faint warmth through her neck. Pain dulled slightly. She felt a spark of something unfamiliar, relief. "My name's Elias," he said gently. "Salvage technician or unofficial medic, depending on how you look at it." Violia's mind reeled. Why would a human help an enemy? The Cathari had made the mistake of thinking humans were weak and cowardly. Some were, but Elias did not fit that mold. He worked silently with a calm, careful focus that belied his small size. He did not ask for anything in return. He moved her onto a hovering stretcher with precise, gentle motions, lifting her from the jagged rocks without causing further injury. Every action was deliberate, respectful, and careful not to exacerbate her wounds. As the ship lifted off, leaving the battlefield behind, she felt herself slipping into a strange, uneasy calm. She wanted to distrust him, to believe he had ulterior motives. Yet each word, each action, showed no hint of deceit. He spoke to her during the journey, telling her stories about the human worlds he had visited, about small acts of kindness and survival. Slowly, she began to understand that humans measured worth differently from Cathari. To them, life itself was sacred, and the choice to protect it was not about strength or honor but about compassion. The ship's interior was cramped but functional, filled with mismatched equipment collected from various worlds. Elias worked tirelessly, tending to her wounds, stabilizing her breathing, and keeping her nourished. He repaired sections of her armor not for battle, but so that she would feel less vulnerable and more comfortable. "You don't have to treat me like I matter," she said weakly one day, her voice hoarse but edged with curiosity. "Like what?" Elias asked, adjusting a panel in her medical pod. "Like I matter, like someone cares whether I live or die." He paused, looking at her with a quiet intensity. "Of course you matter. Everyone matters. That's why I'm here." The simplicity and sincerity of his statement shook her more than she expected. She had never heard such words outside of propaganda or empty diplomatic speeches. This human believed in the value of life itself, independent of strength, rank, or achievement. Days passed. Violia remained paralyzed from the waist down, but her mind sharpened. She analyzed the human's methods, the ways he moved and repaired things, the way he thought. Slowly, she recognized his ingenuity and adaptability, traits she had always admired, albeit begrudgingly, in other species. Humans were underestimated far too often, and here was proof. Then came the attack. Warning alarms blared across the ship. A fleet of pirate vessels had detected the small transport and fired upon them. Lasers struck the hull, shaking the vessel violently. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the ship tilted dangerously to one side. Violia's instincts screamed at her to rise, to fight, to take command, but her body betrayed her, refusing even the simplest movement. "Elias," she managed to croak. "Arm control access, give it to me." He hesitated, incredulous. "You can't move, what are you going to do?" "I can think," she replied, her voice steady despite the pain. He studied her for a tense moment and then nodded, transferring the ship's control interface to her. With her strategic mind, honed through years of combat, she guided Elias through evasive maneuvers, predicting the enemy's trajectory and exploiting their blind spots. Using a combination of her tactical genius and his technical skill, they dodged the pirates' attack and escaped into the cover of a dense asteroid field. Silence returned. Breathing heavily, Elias laughed in disbelief. "Okay, I officially owe you my life." For the first time since the battlefield, Violia allowed herself a flicker of pride. She was still a warrior, not because she could stand or wield weapons, but because her mind remained sharp, her instincts unbroken, and her resolve unwavering. As the ship drifted through quiet space once more, Violia realized that her fate had shifted. She was no longer simply a paralyzed, abandoned soldier left to die. She had survived because of human compassion, because of someone willing to see her value when her own people had not. And though hope was frightening, she understood one thing clearly. She owed her survival to Elias, the human who had stepped in when no one else would, changing the course of her life forever. The ship hummed softly as it drifted through the quiet expanse of space. Stars stretched in endless patterns outside the reinforced viewport, their cold light reflecting faintly on the polished surfaces of the small human transport. Inside, the atmosphere was tense yet calm, a fragile balance maintained by careful systems monitoring and the quiet diligence of Elias. Violia lay in the medical pod, her body still partially paralyzed, her spine damaged beyond what conventional Cathari medicine could repair. Yet for the first time in days, she felt the faint stirrings of determination rather than despair. The human who had saved her, Elias, moved about the cabin with quiet purpose, checking instruments, adjusting life support systems, and repairing small breaches in the armor of the vessel. He worked tirelessly, not pausing even to eat, as if he had become the anchor keeping both of them alive. Violia observed him with sharp, calculating eyes. Humans were unpredictable, often reckless, and prone to overestimating their own abilities, yet this one was different. Elias moved with a careful confidence, always thinking 2 steps ahead, scanning the environment, assessing every risk. She could sense his mind constantly weighing possibilities. What she had once considered a human weakness now appeared to be a different kind of strength, one that her own kind rarely possessed. Days passed with a measured rhythm. Violia remained largely immobile from the waist down, but she used the time to study the ship, learn its systems, and analyze the humans' methods. Elias had programmed rudimentary interfaces so she could interact with ship controls despite her condition. It was small, almost symbolic, but she appreciated it, the first recognition of her value since the battlefield. "You shouldn't have done this," she finally said one evening, her voice weak but firm. "Done what?" Elias asked, adjusting a tool over a panel. Sparks flew harmlessly as the interface hummed to life. "Rescued me, brought me aboard, wasted your time and resources on someone who can't even stand." He paused, looking up at her. His eyes were calm, steady. "And what if I did? Does that make it wrong?" "Humans are fragile," she said. "You risk your life for what, a stranger?" "Someone's alive," he replied simply. "Someone worth saving, that's reason enough." Her translator hummed faintly, rendering the words into Cathari tongue. Violia felt a strange weight in her chest. In all her life, no Cathari had spoken with such simplicity, such honesty. Here was a human whose morality wasn't bound by power, rank, or victory. It was bound by the basic idea that life itself had value. The days that followed were a mixture of quiet recovery and constant vigilance. Elias charted courses through safe sectors, avoiding patrols, pirates, and environmental hazards. He repaired minor structural damage in the ship, fashioned makeshift tools from scrap, and maintained the medical systems that kept her alive. Despite all this, danger always seemed close. One day, the alarm blared unexpectedly. The small transport shook violently as a pirate fleet emerged from behind a nebula. Laser fire streaked across the viewport. Elias rushed to the controls, his hands moving rapidly, trying to maneuver the ship to safety. Violia's instincts flared immediately. She had once commanded fleets through deadly war zones, predicting enemy movements with frightening accuracy. Now she could only move her upper body, yet her mind was sharp, ready to react. "Elias," she said, voice commanding despite its weakness. "Hand me the tactical interface." "I can guide you." He froze, disbelief etched across his face. "You can't move, you can't control the ship." "I can think," she insisted. "Trust me, we can survive this if you listen." He hesitated, but the urgency in her tone left no room for argument. He transferred control access, and Violia began analyzing the enemy fleet. Her mind raced, calculating trajectories, predicting attack vectors, and identifying blind spots. Despite her immobility, she felt her old power returning, not through strength of body, but through clarity of mind. Using her instructions, Elias guided the ship into a series of complex maneuvers. They weaved between asteroids, dipped behind drifting debris, and slipped through narrow gravitational gaps that the pirates could not anticipate. Each movement was precise, executed with the combined effort of human dexterity and alien tactical genius. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the pirate fleet lost track of them. The ship floated silently once again, battered but intact. Elias laughed, a mixture of relief and awe. "Okay, you officially saved us both." Violia allowed herself a brief smile. For the first time since the battlefield, she felt useful, not as a weapon, but as a mind capable of making decisions that saved lives. The pirate attack was a turning point. She realized her value had not diminished because of her paralysis. She could still lead, still think, still make a difference. Strength wasn't only measured in physical ability, and perhaps humans had understood that before her own people had. In the days that followed, Elias grew more attentive, almost protective. He explained how the ship's systems worked, showing her how to interface with sensors, navigational controls, and communication arrays. Violia absorbed every detail, learning to operate systems with her mind and upper body. The human's patience amazed her. He never grew frustrated, never demanded obedience. He only explained and assisted. They traveled through remote sectors, visiting abandoned stations and derelict ships to scavenge for resources. Elias always kept her close, making sure the environment was safe and stable for her condition. She observed the human behavior closely. He displayed ingenuity, empathy, and adaptability, all traits that her culture often overlooked. Humans were underestimated across the galaxy, but she now understood that their survival relied on more than brute strength. One evening, as they floated through the soft glow of a distant nebula, Elias spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I don't know why the universe keeps putting people like you in front of me," he said. "Maybe it's a test, maybe it's fate, but you're remarkable." Violia studied him, intrigued by the genuine tone in his voice. "You speak oddly," she said. "You risk everything for someone you barely know. It defies logic." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it does, or maybe it's just human." She didn't respond, but the thought lingered. Perhaps survival wasn't always about logic or victory. Perhaps it was about the choices one made in moments of vulnerability, about the courage to act when others would turn away. Weeks passed in this rhythm. Violia continued her recovery, slowly regaining limited movement in her upper body. The constant attention from Elias, combined with his patient instruction, helped her regain confidence. Yet she still longed for a solution for her paralyzed legs, a way to reclaim mobility fully. Elias searched tirelessly. He hacked communications, scoured human and alien medical networks, and eventually discovered a research station specializing in experimental neural regeneration. The technology was untested for alien physiology, but it offered a glimmer of hope. They approached the station cautiously. The humans there were hesitant to assist a Cathari soldier. Reports of the Empire's cruelty and ruthlessness preceded her, yet Elias refused to leave. "We don't give up," he said firmly. "Not on her, not on anyone." The scientists agreed, reluctantly at first, and Violia underwent an initial series of diagnostic scans and treatments. They were long and painful, designed to map neural pathways and stimulate regrowth in the damaged sections of her spine. She endured each procedure silently, biting back frustration, anger, and fear. Elias remained by her side the entire time, offering calm reassurance and gentle encouragement. Through it all, she realized something she had never acknowledged. She depended on him, not just for survival, but for strength of spirit. His presence reminded her that life was not measured solely in victories or battles, but in connection, in trust, in the choice to act for someone else. She could not move her legs yet, but she was learning a new form of power, resilience, strategy, and partnership. The Cathari valued warriors, but perhaps there was more to being alive than brute strength. Perhaps the human who had stepped in when no one else would have shown her a different kind of heroism, one that transcended culture and species. Days bled into weeks. Slowly, sensation began returning to Violia's lower extremities. Small twitches at first, barely perceptible, then stronger and more deliberate. She practiced moving with the help of support harnesses and medical interfaces, her determination unwavering. Each movement was a victory, each spark of mobility a reminder of the human who had refused to abandon her. The bond between them deepened. Words were unnecessary. Understanding grew in shared silence, in coordinated effort, in the quiet acknowledgement of dependence and trust. Violia's pride remained intact, yet she recognized the humility required to accept help. Elias did not see weakness in her. He saw potential, possibility, life worth preserving. When they finally prepared to leave the research station, the first real test awaited. Rebel remnants loyal to the Cathari Empire had detected her location. Her enemies came not to negotiate, but to kill, to erase the anomaly of a warrior who had survived against all odds. Violia stood with Elias at her side, the first time she had been upright in weeks. Her legs trembled slightly, but she bore herself with a newfound poise. This was not the same warrior who had lain abandoned on the battlefield. She was stronger in ways her people could never comprehend, tempered by vulnerability, guided by human compassion, and sharpened by necessity. As the approaching fleet closed in, she and Elias prepared to act. This time, the fight was not just for survival. It was to prove that strength could take many forms, that the choices to protect, to endure, and to trust were as powerful as any weapon. For Violia, the lessons of the battlefield had shifted. She would fight not only for herself, but for the human who had refused to leave her behind. Together, they would defy expectation, challenge prejudice, and survive where others would have failed. The stars ahead were bright, cold, and full of danger. Yet for the first time in a long time, Violia felt ready to face them. Not alone, but alongside someone who had chosen to see her not as a burden, but as a being worth saving. The research station lay deep within an uncharted system, its exterior battered but functional. Violia had spent weeks here, undergoing experimental procedures to restore her mobility. Each day brought pain, frustration, and slow progress, but also a fragile hope that she had not felt since the battlefield. Ilias never left her side, observing, adjusting, and encouraging her through every session. The human medical team worked carefully, their hands precise as they manipulated delicate neural stimulators and synthetic tissue grafts. They explained every procedure to her, though their voices often carried uncertainty. They had never treated a Cathari warrior before. Violia listened closely, absorbing every instruction, every detail. Knowledge was power, and she intended to reclaim every ounce of it. The first signs were subtle. A twitch in her left toes, a flicker of sensation along her calves. She gripped the edge of the pod, eyes widening in disbelief. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Ilias smiled, though his expression carried exhaustion and relief in equal measure. "I saw it. That's progress. Small steps, but steps nonetheless." Days turned into nights, and nights bled into cycles of stimulation, rest, and observation. Violia practiced small movements, assisted by robotic exoskeletons that helped her legs bear partial weight. Each motion was laborious, painful, and fraught with uncertainty, but with every step her confidence grew. Ilias adjusted the support systems, modified interfaces, and even fashioned a makeshift harness so she could practice standing for longer periods. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he warned one evening. "You'll exhaust yourself." "Exhaustion is temporary," she replied, teeth clenched against the discomfort. "Progress is permanent." His eyes softened. "I admire your determination. But remember, sometimes strength is knowing when to let someone help." She looked at him, puzzled by the simplicity of his words. In Cathari culture, strength was displayed through endurance and victory. Asking for help was a weakness. Yet the human had saved her life once already, and every day he reminded her that her survival was not solely dependent on herself. Weeks of laborious training passed. Violia regained control over her lower body, first moving her legs slightly, then standing unassisted for a few seconds, then taking careful steps with support. Every movement felt alien, strange, and exhilarating. She discovered muscles she had thought dead, nerves that sparked with new life, and a resilience she had never known. But even as she grew stronger, the threat of pursuit loomed. Rebel factions loyal to her former empire had detected her presence. They were relentless, motivated not by diplomacy or reason, but by vengeance. Violia knew the humans would not hesitate to attack the station to eliminate the anomaly of a Cathari warrior who had survived and allied with a human. Ilias prepared her for the coming confrontation. "We leave tonight," he said, his voice steady, though his hands betrayed a flicker of tension. "I've calculated their approach. We can outrun them, but we'll need you at full strength." Violia nodded, determination hardening within her. She flexed her legs, feeling the regained strength coursing through her body. "I am ready, not just to survive, but to fight to prove that strength is more than a weapon." The station's alarms blared, cutting through the quiet hum of machinery. Sensors picked up multiple vessels entering the system, moving swiftly, weapons primed. Ilias activated defensive protocols, sealing compartments and boosting shields. The station shook under the first volleys of energy blasts. Violia moved swiftly to the control interface. Her legs, fully supported by exoskeletal harnesses and her restored neural pathways, allowed her to maneuver across the room with surprising speed. She interfaced with the station's defense systems, overriding automated turrets, predicting attack patterns, and coordinating with Ilias to maximize their advantage. The battle was chaotic, a violent ballet of light and motion. Rebel ships fired relentlessly, striking the station's exterior and shaking the interior. Violia directed defensive turrets with precise calculations, anticipating enemy maneuvers and exploiting blind spots. Each command was executed flawlessly by Ilias and the human crew, creating a seamless blend of alien strategic genius and human technical skill. Amid the chaos, Violia spotted a damaged escape pod drifting toward the station. Inside, a young human engineer floated helplessly, trapped by systems failure. Without hesitation, she directed a turret to clear debris and activated the docking mechanism. With careful coordination, Elias maneuvered the pod into a safe bay. Violia extended a hand to the engineer, helping them out of the wreckage. "Thank you," the engineer whispered, eyes wide with fear and gratitude. Violia nodded briefly. "Survival requires teamwork, remember that." The battle raged on for hours. The rebel fleet, confident in their numerical advantage, underestimated the combination of alien tactics and human ingenuity. Violia predicted each maneuver, each attack vector, and guided Elias to exploit weaknesses in the enemy formation. Slowly, ship by ship, the rebels faltered, their attacks becoming disorganized and reactive rather than precise. Finally, the last vessel fell silent, its systems disabled. The station trembled, battered but intact. Silence returned, heavy with relief and exhaustion. Elias leaned against the control console, sweat streaking his face, eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and disbelief. We did it, together." Violia allowed herself a small smile. "Together," she agreed. For the first time, she did not feel the emptiness of abandonment. She had not survived alone. In the days that followed, repairs began in earnest. Violia, now fully mobile, assisted with structural restoration, medical treatment of the injured, and reorganization of the station's defenses. She discovered new ways to combine her Cathari training with human techniques, improving efficiency and effectiveness beyond what either species had anticipated. Elias observed her quietly, noting her adaptability and resilience. "You've changed," he said one evening as they reviewed systems diagnostics. "You're not just a warrior anymore, you're a leader, a strategist, someone who inspires." Violia considered his words. "Leadership is not measured by fear or victory alone," she said slowly. "It is measured by choices, by protecting life, by enduring, by using what you have to do what is right." He smiled faintly, a warmth in his eyes. "And you've done all that despite everything." Months passed as they rebuilt the station, forged alliances with nearby systems, and trained new recruits. Violia grew stronger physically and mentally, her paralysis now a memory replaced by renewed confidence and purpose. Elias remained her steadfast companion, guiding, assisting, and trusting her judgment. Their bond, forged in adversity and danger, became a quiet but unshakable partnership. Then came the final test. Intelligence reports indicated a coordinated strike by a coalition fleet intent on seizing the station and eliminating the Cathari anomaly once and for all. Violia prepared meticulously, analyzing enemy formations, calculating defensive strategies, and integrating human technology with Cathari tactics. When the fleet arrived, their confidence was evident. They assumed superiority through numbers, expecting an easy victory. Violia and Elias responded with precision, predicting movements, countering attacks, and exploiting weaknesses. Every strike was calculated, every maneuver deliberate. The battle was brutal. Explosions rocked the station, systems flickered, and warning alarms blared incessantly. Yet Violia's guidance, combined with Elias' skill, allowed them to repel wave after wave of attacks. They rescued trapped personnel, repaired critical systems mid-combat, and used the terrain of space to their advantage. As the last enemy vessel disengaged, Violia stood on the observation deck, looking at the wreckage drifting silently in the void. The battle was won not through sheer force, but through strategy, cooperation, and the recognition that life, any life, was worth saving. Elias joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We did it," he said softly. "All of it." She nodded, feeling the weight of triumph, relief, and gratitude. "Not I," she corrected. "We." In the quiet aftermath, Violia reflected on her journey. She had gone from a paralyzed and abandoned warrior to a survivor, a strategist, and a leader. She had learned that true strength was not measured by muscle or weaponry alone, but by resilience, intelligence, compassion, and the bonds forged with others. Elias had shown her that humanity, often underestimated, contained a strength of spirit as formidable as any warrior's blade. Together, they began charting new paths through the galaxy, rebuilding, exploring, and protecting those who could not protect themselves. Violia's legend would grow, not just as a Cathari warrior, but as a symbol of what could be achieved when beings of different worlds chose to act with courage, empathy, and unwavering determination. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, had tested them. And together, Violia and Elias had endured, transforming survival into triumph and hope into a force as powerful as any weapon. For the first time, she understood what it truly meant to live and to fight, not just for oneself, but for another. And in that understanding, she discovered a strength greater than any she had known, the strength to trust, to endure, and to hope, even in the darkest reaches of space.